Hello, friends. It's 9 a.m. on a Thursday morning, and that's when we get together for another edition of Our Town on 94.9 and 99.1 The River. Our Town, as always, brought to you by Decorah Bank and Trust. My name is Darren Swinson. A little bit later on in the program, we'll have our monthly conversation with Decorah School Superintendent Mark Lane. We'll also talk to Kathy Schwartzhoff from Helping Services for Youth and Family. We'll discuss January being National Mentoring Month and an event coming up tonight at the First Lutheran Church, and a training coming up here in the not-too-distant future regarding Helping Services for Youth and Family. But it's the first week of the state legislative session for 2022. We'll talk to State Representative Ann Osmundson from Volga, but we will begin our conversation this morning with State Representative Mike Bergan of Dorchester. We'll have that conversation for you right now as we get going on Our Town, brought to you by Decorah Bank and Trust on 94.9 and 99.1 The River. Having a conversation with State Representative Mike Bergan about the early days of the Iowa legislative session for 2022. And Mike, Tuesday night, the governor gave her condition of the state address. What did you like about what she said? Any red flags in anything she said? And what's the most optimistic thing you heard on Tuesday night?
Well, I think I want to agree with the governor on the condition of the state is good. Even as we, in this period of COVID recovery, what was the bumps and bruises that we might have with that, we are in a good, strong position on a statewide level. I appreciate the governor putting out an aggressive agenda for us to work on, and I'm certainly interested in learning more about some of those high points, particularly income tax reform, as she's looking at putting in a 4% rate on income tax.
And when anytime you talk about changing the tax code, changing the tax rate, you worry about its effect on overall state revenue. I know a lot of details have to be worked out yet, but do you feel this plan is something that's manageable without hurting big time the revenue that would come into the state?
And I think that is the question, and we'll have to get into the details to evaluate aspects of the tax proposal. I looked at the preliminary budget documents. They're looking at a $225 million impact the first year. She mentioned a $500 million reduction overall. It does look at a 3 to 4 year phase in to get to that 4% from that preliminary summary. So certainly we're going to need to get into the details of the bill and the proposal and evaluate that going forward. And we want to look at those, the impact of those tax changes over the long term, over a period of time, 5 to 8 years down the road, to make sure that it's sustainable. I think it surprised some of us. It looks like a tax simplification in some respects, making some things simpler. And as a tax preparer over the last 35 years, things have just consistently gotten more complex in filling out returns. This is a little bit of optimism in heading for that approach.
Education was another topic of discussion on Tuesday night. The governor putting forth a plan to give parents a little bit more choice in their children's education. Is that something you support?
Well, certainly we look at our public education system as that, a public education. We have school boards that elect and our citizens elect those school board members. We have an expectation of individuals being involved in government. That's just part of democracy. And so that's not a significant change. There is some comments made on some alternative school funding or funding for alternative school options that I'll certainly need to know more about the details of proposals and look at that before I venture any position on that topic.
And related to that, you look at the district that you serve, options other than public schools just frankly aren't there. And there's a lot of places in rural parts of Iowa that is the case. Now, you go to an urban area, there are a few more options as compared to the rural areas. But looking at the district that you serve, Is this bill really even practical, because there's not a lot of options out there other than the public school options?
Yeah, well, we do have some parochial school systems. We've got some homeschool options, which, depending on the details, may have some impact here, even in our region. I know the proposal floated a year ago. I just could not find support for it. Was in some isolated areas in some specific circumstances, and I just don't think that was good policy or feasible. And so I really want to get more details on this. We do have strong parochial schools in Northeast Iowa that serve individuals well and families. That's their choice. And so we still have those options. We have open enrollment options, statewide from those options. One of the issues that limits that is transportation and to achieve a neighboring school district attendance. But we'll certainly look at that, as a group in-house and evaluate and see what makes sense for Iowa.
I know sometimes you get into the weeds of politics and statements getting made that might not have the best context to them, but you had one of the Senate leaders come out earlier this week and claim that some in education have some sinister motives regarding educating of children. Do you believe rhetoric like that does any good when you're trying to actually improve things, when you make statements like that and it creates an us against them category? Is rhetoric like that really necessary?
Well, I certainly don't practice that type of rhetoric, or at least not intentionally. And if I did, I'd be apologizing. I think that it really sets up some opposition when we're trying to find solutions that we can all agree on. And so I think there's maybe a point of frustration from in the Senate. I certainly don't share those feelings. I certainly wouldn't characterize my sense of the circumstances in that way, that there's even an agenda. Sometimes people make mistakes, or approaches that we just need to reevaluate, but I don't agree with the sentiment that was expressed.
We've touched on taxes. We've touched on education. Independent of what the governor brought up on Tuesday night, what are some of your other goals for this session that you would like to see accomplished?
I'm working on 3 bill drafts at the moment. So one is to address solar residential tax credits. The credits ended as of December 31st of 2021, here just 3 weeks ago, for those installations completed. The challenge is that we had caps set into place, and so the money to support those credits has already been exceeded. And so we have some projects that have gone in the area that are not being funded. And so I'm working in conjunction with Senator Clemish on a bill draft to fulfill expectations for those tax credits. And I feel it's something that's manageable and that's prudent for us to do in the Iowa House. And so working with the senator, I'm hopeful that we'll get something moved forward on that. I'm also working in the area of Medicaid and insurance claims and some of our data sources. And then I have another project around our child abuse, and I'm involved with our Child Protection Center out of Allen Hospital in Blackhawk County, which serves Northeast Iowa. So when there are cases of child and sexual abuse, that they have a forensic questioning process. We preserve evidence for trial and augment the services that we have to make sure that abusers are prosecuted.
Mike, we appreciate you taking some time to talk about the early days of the legislative session. We look forward to catching up with you quite a few times between now and the end of April. Thank you.
Well, it's a pleasure to be invited to participate this morning. Thank you.
Mike Bergan, state representative from Dorchester. He is in his third term in the U.S. or the Iowa House, and we will be chatting with him throughout the legislative session. The 2022 Iowa legislative session is underway this week, and we're having our first conversation with State Representative Ann Osmundson. And Ann, thanks for your cooperation in doing these again this year. Before we break down the specifics of what the governor stated in her condition of the state address earlier this week, going into this session, what are the things that you would most likely want to see accomplished by the time you guys get out by the end of April?
It would be really nice to see something done on the bottle bill. People in our district are really upset with having no place to redeem their cans. And I think it's across the state. It's not just us. And I know there's work being done on it. So I'm just hoping we can get all the stakeholders together and get something accomplished that works for everybody across the state. That would be my main goal.
I know that's something you have talked about the last couple of years. Has progress been made in solving some of the issues that are concerning to both the redemption centers and the public itself? Are we in a better spot to have a conversation to move forward than we were a couple of years ago on that issue?
I think so. It seems like some of the stakeholders have come together and at least are talking, where before they weren't even talking. So I have only been here a day and a half, so I'm have not connected with everybody yet. But hopefully those conversations will continue and we'll see some progress.
Governor gave her condition of the state address on Tuesday night of this week. A lot of the conversation was based on tax policy. With the way the economy is right now, with the way the state's finances are in place right now, is this the right time to have that long-term conversation about the state taxes in your mind?
Yeah, I do. I think it is. We are in good shape. We've been in good shape for the last several years, and we have, quite a surplus in the taxpayer relief fund that we feel like we need to get back to the taxpayers, and just a surplus in general in the general fund. So yeah, I do think it's a good time to go ahead and try to do a little bit more in tax relief for Iowans.
I know a lot of the details will be worked out as the legislative session is going on, but the governor touched on a 4% flat tax rate in the state and getting rid of state taxes on retirement income. Is that a good place to start the conversation, or would you like to maybe have conversations even a little deeper regarding taxes in the state?
I think it is a good place to start. I just had another legislator approach me yesterday about a bill he's proposing to take away the tax on people that are 65 and older to help keep them in the state. And also locally, older people will sometimes talk about their property tax going up and they're in a fixed income. So I thought, well, that will help that group of people also in that area. So yeah, I think it's a great place to start. This is the first I've heard about the 4% flat tax. But as the legislature meets, both the Senate and the House, we'll discuss those things, bring up some other ideas, but it's a good jumping off point.
I know education got some headlines Tuesday night as well. The governor proposing basically giving parents a few more options regarding their children's education as compared to just the one option of public schools in every situation. Is that a good idea in your mind?
Yes, as I talk with representatives from more urban areas, they feel like kids are stuck in a school and sometimes it isn't a good fit for them and they can't get out of it. So yeah, I'm just anxious to hear more conversations on how we can give parents and kids more choice in their education.
From a practical perspective in the district that you cover, the options for non-public education are a little limited in the district that you cover, especially when you get to the 9 through 12 high school level. You got to travel at least an hour to go to a private high school. I know there's the debate on kids being stuck in more urban areas, but is that How does this affect a district like yours when the non-public school options are pretty limited?
And that's where I feel like it may not affect our schools, because we have pretty good rural schools. But I don't think it will hurt them either, because it will give the choice to the kids that have the availability of other schools to attend. But like you said, we really don't have that many options in the rural areas. So it really should not hurt our rural schools, is my thought. I'm open to hearing thoughts and suggestions on it.
Other than education, we've hit on taxes, we've hit on the bottle bill. Are there any other issues that at least early on in this session you expect to be having discussions about or expect to be taken care of? Anything maybe that was left over from last year that didn't get done?
Well, I think in our special session, we talked about the vaccine mandate. The president has made the executive order that companies with 100 employees or more need to mandate a vaccine. And there's quite a number of people in both the House and the Senate that question whether he can do that, should be able to do that. And so I'm sure there's going to be some legislation around that, giving people choice, giving them their own options to take care of their own health issues, their own body, because there's some real questions about what's in the vaccine and what long-term effects could have on people.
Related to the executive order regarding the vaccine mandate, last Friday, the head of the Iowa Department of Labor came out and said no matter what the Supreme Court rules on that, they're not going to enforce that in Iowa. The concerns regarding one person making a mandate like that are true at the federal level. Are those concerns, can you say the same thing at the state level, having one person saying, hey, we're not going to do this?
That's a good question. I am guessing they have gotten a lot of input from those in authority around them. We didn't have a mandate before, so it just brings it back to people's making their own choices again. And so I don't have a problem with him saying we're not going to have a mandate because we did not have a mandate before. Does that make sense?
Yes, and so along bigger picture, you would rather have that done legislatively than through the executive branch. Is that a fair way to put it?
Okay, right. It would maybe have a better standing if it went through the legislature.
All right, Ann, we appreciate you joining us. And as for ways for people to get a hold of you throughout the legislative session, public meetings, et cetera, like that, how do folks contact you and bring up any questions or concerns they may have?
My legislative website or email is Anne, A-N-N-E, Osmundson, OSMUNDSON at legis.iowa.gov. Or you can call me, 563-880-8227.
And we appreciate you taking some time telling us about what's going on in the early days of the legislative session. We look forward to chatting with you quite a few times between now and the end of April.
Thank you, Darren. You have a good day and look forward to talking with you later.
Ann Osmundson, State Representative from Volga, joining us to talk about the early days of the Iowa legislative session. Having a conversation this morning with Kathy Schwartzhoff from Helping Services for Youth and Family. January is mentoring month, and we're here to talk about the mentoring program with Kathy. Kathy, as always, thanks for taking the time. What is mentoring? What services do you provide regarding mentoring at Helping Services for Youth and Family?
Mentoring is a very simple type of activity or simple kind of way to volunteer. It's on a role model for a young person between the ages of 6 and 16. You spend a minimum of 4 hours a month with the youth, and that can be in a school building if it works in your particular community that you go to the school and spend an hour with the youth doing things, or you can do it out in the community. And it can be just one person doing it. A couple can be a mentor together. Families can be mentors together. So we have lots of models for people to choose from, and lots of kids who are waiting that people can choose from as well.
What type of an impact does mentoring have on young people? What type of an impact does it have on those who become mentors?
Well, we've seen a lot of changes in the kids that we work with over the years. Probably some of our best success stories are when the kids come back and say, I want to be a mentor for somebody else, and do that successfully. And they really appreciate the idea that this is a commitment and this is something that I want to do, because they've benefited from it. So that's always good. We've also seen kids who, were shy in the beginning, who constantly got bullied, who really didn't have very good friendship skills. And those have evolved through that one-on-one time that they spend, or that time that they spend with the person. Their confidence is better. They kind of get somebody to talk to that they can say, oh, I'm having trouble with bullying, or, oh, this is a concern for me, and somebody that listens and is a good friend to them. And so those are extreme benefits. On the flip side, for those mentors, we all know young people, and spending time with them is extremely fulfilling. And this is exactly what happens in mentoring, is that the adults get connected with the kids, and they have this lifelong friend that in the future they're invited to their wedding and their graduation parties. And we've had mentees who have called their mentor when they're ready to buy a house and say, hey, this is new territory for me, kind of stuff. And they're long done with the program, but they're not done with that friendship. And that's what is wonderful. Sometimes too, it's just, we ask for a minimum of a year. Sometimes that's all that a volunteer is able to give. And those too are fulfilling types of experiences as well.
How much of a need is there for mentors in our community?
Well, we serve at Helping Services, Almaquee, Howard, and Winneshiek counties. We also have a satellite office in Delaware. And with the services that we offer out of the Decorah office, that's Almaquee, Howard, and Winneshiek, we have 18 kids who are waiting. There are a few more that are school-based mentors or mentees that we don't have listed yet, because it takes time to get through those applications once they're referred and that kind of thing. So there are a few more that want to have school-based mentoring that aren't listed on our website. And that's a really good resource, is to check out helpingservices.org on either Facebook, or really our website's the best resource, because it tells you more about what mentoring is, gets you looking at the waiting list of kids who are waiting. And when we have those listed, there's a name and the use age and what they like to do. And those aren't their real names, because for confidentiality, we can't share that. But there truly is, if there says that there's Fran and they're 12 and they live in Cresco, and here's what they like to do. There really is a 12-year-old that lives in Cresco that likes those things to do, but that's not their real name. And that's a good way to kind of just look to see generally what somebody's interests are. And on the website, it tells you to contact us, and then we'll get you started with an application, and we do a training and get you started with support that's regular, and offer events that help you with that, doing your time with your youth.
And I think you bring up one of the most important points about this, because some may be interested in being a mentor, but they're saying, what do I do? How do I establish this? How do I create that relationship? And you guys at Helping Services really provide a lot of tools to make this a positive thing for not only the young person, but the mentor themselves.
Right. And I think that sometimes people say to themselves, oh gosh, I don't know if I have the skills to be a mentor. If you're a friend to others, you have the skills. That's as basic as it gets. But we do offer services and support to people so that when they do have a concern or just even a question, we're there for them, and we help train them to be ready before it starts, but keep an ongoing discussion with them and provide resources and trainings. In fact, we have a training coming up the 25th of January from 5:30 to 6:30 over Zoom, and you can find that on the events calendar on our website. It's on problem gambling awareness, and it's really going to be a wonderful training conducted by Jen Stoka over Zoom. And she will be talking about, especially, you know, what's happening with youth related to gambling, and sports betting is just really big right now and can really cause some concern for lots of folks. So we encourage people to get on that training, and you don't have to be involved in mentoring at all to be part of any of our trainings. We offer those regularly.
And of course, coming up tonight, as this will air, you got a mentoring potluck dinner. Tell us about that.
Yes, twice a year, we invite families to come and join us for events. And that is exactly what the Potluck is doing, inviting families to come and join us. And we ask that our mentors bring a dish to pass. We don't have families bring anything because we don't want to cause any hardship for their family related to food. But we want to encourage everybody to come to that. And if you're interested in mentoring, you can come to it as well. And it'll just be a time to celebrate that it is National Mentoring Month, and also we'll have some games to play, getting to know you games, and some board games available after we're done eating. So we really encourage people to come to that. That'll be at First Lutheran Church from 5:30 to 7 tonight.
Anything else you want to pass on regarding January being National Mentoring Month, the mentoring program through Helping Services? Anything we're missing this morning?
I think the biggest thing we need to just share is to encourage people to become a mentor. We've had folks that contacted us and said, you know, I've been thinking about this for a while. Now's the time to do it, because there's those kids that are waiting and they just need a friend, somebody to hang out with them. And we'll talk you through it and make sure that you understand everything and get you started.
All right, Kathy, we appreciate you taking some time to tell us about National Mentoring Month and the services that you guys provide through Helping Services for Youth and Family. Always great having a conversation with you in the month of January, and we thank you and everybody else at Helping Services for Youth and Family for the great services that you provide our communities.
Thank you. And we'll take a shout out too to everybody that went to Holiday Lights over the holidays. That was wonderful to have so many people support Helping Services for Youth and Families. Kathy
Schwartzhoff from Helping Services for Youth and Family, and National Mentoring Month here in the month of January. Having our monthly conversation with Decorah School Superintendent Mark Lane as we begin a new calendar year, even though we've been in the academic year for about, let's see, 4 months, 5 months. I can't add anymore, but I told myself there would be no math. And Mark, your school board met for the first time in the new year earlier this week, and little surprise, we're still talking about COVID. The CDC came out with some new guidelines related to schools last week, and related to those new guidelines, what have you been able to figure out? What's maybe still up in the air when it comes to questions and interpretations? Where are we at right now?
Yeah, I think the biggest question we had coming out of break was really what would be the interpretation of CDC guidelines that came out over winter break in Iowa. The Iowa Department of Public Health, and I'm sure this is true in many states across the country. I think local, at the state level, there's always a unique interpretation of information that comes out of the CDC. And so I think that was my big question as we received new CDC guidelines. And so really appreciated that Krista Vandenbrink from Winnebago County Public Health, and then Dr. Janet Ryan, who's a member of the Winnebago County Board of Public Health, joined the board at the meeting last night to just talk through that guidance. And I know Krista had an opportunity over the last week to hear from people at Iowa Public Health around, what does this new guidance mean in Iowa? And so really the biggest thing, I think, for us on a daily basis is the information that came out around isolation. So when people have a confirmed positive COVID test, that isolation period, all of last school year and then up until winter break this school year, was just a standard 10-day isolation period from the onset of symptoms. And if people then were symptom-free, they were returning. The new information from the CDC that came out over winter break communicated that that isolation period could be reduced to 5 days. If, again, that person was fever-free for 24 hours, other symptoms were dissipating. But then when that person returned for the next 5 days, that they should be wearing a mask. And so last week, I think at the county level, people were making sense of that new information. In my conversations with other superintendents, people were interpreting and making sense of those new standards, and our nurses worked to communicate with impacted families last week. And so it was just a good opportunity for our board to hear directly from Winnebago County Public Health, to hear that interpretation and understanding of that new CDC guidance, so that our board is just aware of and understanding really what's going on in our schools on a daily basis. Last week, we weren't quite sure what to expect coming back from winter break, when people had traveled and maybe been in greater opportunities to maybe be near people that were positive. As we measured at the end of the week last week, on Thursday, we had 11 individuals in isolation due to a positive COVID test, which is, it's not out of the ordinary for our experience this school year. And so I think it will be interesting this week and then into next week. I would expect, that we're kind of seeing the continuation of maybe people's travels over winter break, but I'm hopeful that, we don't see a spike, and that that number would stay, manageable around that 10 to 12 individuals on a given day. That has allowed us to function pretty well as a school district, and keep students in school throughout this year.
And related to the isolation guidelines, the new ones from the CDC, it's now a 5-day sitting out guideline, and then 5 days back, and you should wear a mask. Does your vaccination status change any of that? Are you treated any differently depending on your vaccination status?
Not to my understanding. Really, the difference would be around what the CDC recommends with quarantining, and really some of the CDC guidance around quarantining. It's not something that in Iowa we haven't been adhering directly to CDC guidance around quarantining really since the beginning of the school year. We did a lot of quarantining of students last year. It was very impactful. But the direction that we've received from Iowa Public Health this year was to continue with isolation. But we've we haven't implemented quarantining the way that we have this year. And so while people, if they talk to their medical provider, if they talk with their doctor or with Winneshiek Public Health, if they've been exposed to a positive case, their medical provider may talk to them about what CDC recommendations are. And we do have families that, if they are exposed, they may choose to quarantine for a period and have their child stay home from school. But unlike last year, it's not a requirement like it was last year, which, that the quarantining last year led to a great deal higher levels of absence than we've experienced this year, just because we were, while we may have only 5 or 6 people in isolation with a positive test last year, there were times where, we may have across the district 40 or 50 students quarantining because of a possible exposure.
And related to the vaccines, of course, the mandate has come down from the federal government about businesses with more than 100 employees being required to have their employees vaccinated. That case went before the Supreme Court last week. The interpretation of that and whether the enforcement of that will happen is different from state to state. I know this was a topic of discussion at your school board meeting this week. Where are you guys at when it comes to mandating vaccines among your employee base?
At this point, where we have not taken any action to implement a policy. Probably over a month ago now, we started doing some work behind the scenes to understand the emergency temporary order from OSHA, but we knew appeals processes were happening and that was likely to make its way to the Supreme Court. We were prepared. We were prepared coming out of winter break to have a special meeting. It would have been a week ago tomorrow. We were prepared to have a special meeting to possibly approve some policies in relation to that. Our legal counsel, in talking with them early last week, they suggested that we could wait until the meeting that occurred last night. So we canceled our special meeting last week and moved the possibility of potentially moving forward with policies related to vaccination of employees. Was on the agenda for last night's meeting. And then we really did watch Friday, that Supreme Court, the arguments that occurred. And I know our legal counsel was watching that closely. And then late Friday, I guess, more attention was given to the Supreme Court case. And then late Friday, the commissioner of OSHA in Iowa came out with a statement through the governor's office that in Iowa, regardless of what the Supreme Court decision might be, that Iowa OSHA was not going to be moving forward with the implementation of the emergency temporary standard. And so in consultation with our legal counsel over the weekend, we didn't move forward with our agenda item around policies last night. In some ways, I think maybe that's the end of the story. But I've learned over the last 2 years that it's probably not. So behind the scenes, policies speaking to employee vaccination, we have those in hand. We have them written. We've begun the process of, well, what would be our processes if we did have to implement this for some reason? What would that look like? How would we manage that? And I guess right now we just, we're keeping those processes and we're keeping those policies on our shelf over here. And if something would come out from the Supreme Court, if something would come out from the Iowa OSHA, if at some point in the next few weeks or months, it seems like we need to take action around policies and processes, we're prepared to do that. But right now it's I guess I would say right now we don't have a policy in place. We're not pursuing having a policy in place, but if the advice of our council becomes get your policies approved and start your processes, we're prepared to do that.
With respect to the privacy of your employees, do you know the vaccination status of most of your employees? And if so, is most of your staff and faculty vaccinated?
I guess the only thing that we really know is back almost a year ago now, when we worked with St. Ben's and Crossroads Academy to provide vaccination clinics for employees of all three organizations. As we worked with Winneshiek County Public Health to facilitate vaccination clinics, just through the facilitation of that, we know at that time that about right around 80% of our employees took advantage of an opportunity to receive vaccination through our clinic at school. But as far as documenting that as a part of employee personnel files, anything like that, we haven't taken that action. And so it's more just going back to we know that about 80% of folks did take advantage of the on-site clinic. There may have been people that took advantage or that sought vaccination through their personal health care provider at a different time. And so it's not something that we're formally gathering information on and monitoring.
Moving on to another subject, Iowa legislative session that begins this week. What's your educational wish list for lawmakers this year?
I shared with the board last night, we, as a school board, we're members of the Iowa Association of School Boards. As a district, we're a member of an organization called Rural School Advocates of Iowa. And both of those two organizations, each year we put out a list of legislative priorities. And I think everything that we've identified in those two organizations that we're a part of, I think they're important things. But the big thing for me this year is around an adequate increase in our state supplemental aid, our funding formula. We know Iowa schools that our funding is formula driven. It comes directly from the legislature. It's a multiplication problem of per pupil funding times the number of students in our district. That's really the building block of school funding. And that funding formula really hasn't changed since around the time I was born in the early 70s. And as you look back over that history of about 50 years, we're in we're in about year 12 of some of the lowest funding increases Iowa schools have ever faced. If you go back to the 90s, over the course of that decade, the average increase in school funding was about 3.8% each year. If you move forward to the first decade of the new century, from 2000 to 2010, that average supplemental aid went up about 3.2% over that 10-year span. Since 2011, our annual increase has been about 1.9%. And we're struggling with that increase, allowing us to provide competitive wages for both certified and classified positions. We know in Northeast Iowa that, all around us, or businesses, companies, we're facing a workforce shortage. And so we compete with other businesses in Winneshiek County, and our ability to provide a competitive hourly wage for a custodian, to provide a competitive hourly wage for nutrition services employees, to have an hourly wage that's attractive to somebody to serve as a special education associate. we're falling behind other businesses that we compete with for employees, and that's a direct result of that lower increase that we've experienced over the last 10 to 12 years. Really, in my mind, a minimum increase of about 3.75, if not a larger increase to state supplemental aid, it's critical. We're facing the highest inflation that we've seen since 1982. Everybody's facing that, businesses, employers, and employees. And in order to do the business of school, we need to be able to compete and attract and retain employees. We think about school and we think about the teacher in the classroom with the students. Teachers make up about 60% of our workforce, but the other 40% is associates. It's building secretaries. It's our custodians, day and night custodians. It's our bus drivers. And things come to a grinding halt when you don't have people to do the job. And right, all of us, everybody knows that part of attracting and retaining a good workforce is having a competitive wage, having competitive benefits packages. And so my wish list is that we look at this year and we say, we need to start getting back to a place where our public schools can compete effectively to build the workforce needed. 2 years ago, when I arrived in Decorah, we didn't have the same struggles we have today to really make sure that our vacancies, especially in things like special education associates, bus drivers, that those are getting filled effectively.
Related to school funding, you mentioned the formula hasn't been touched in 50 years. Isn't it time to look at the formula?
In a lot of ways, I think Iowa does the Iowa formula is effective because it treats Iowa school districts on a pretty level playing field in relation to things like poverty and property valuation. So the most property-rich school district in Iowa is the Okoboji School District. There's the property in that school district has a high value, and so it's a property-rich school district. And then there are other school districts in Iowa. Think of, a community like in the Des Moines metro area, but maybe is like a bedroom community. They don't have a lot of business or industry. That's a more property poor district, and our funding formula tries to balance that out. The areas where I think we struggle within that is around special education. And so, some of our special services like EL services. And so another area around that has been something that the legislature, I think this is something they've really done well the last few years, is they've tried to address the disparity in transportation costs. So like for us in Decorah, we're a large school district, over 300 square miles. Our transportation costs are higher than other school districts that maybe aren't as large as we are. And over the last 3 to 5 years, the legislature has adjusted the formula in some ways to balance that playing field related to transportation. But as far as, special education funding, some of the at-risk funding, I think those are areas within that formula that could definitely be tweaked to help us. Almost every school district in Iowa runs a special ed deficit. We spend more money on special education than we receive. And what happens is that goes right back onto local property tax. And so when we run that special ed deficit, that's going to be something that each year our board has to account for that in local property tax to help cover that special education deficit.
You mentioned the funding formula for transportation. How big of a necessity did that become for the Decorah School District when the merger with Northwind took place?
Yeah, I think ironically, through our merger, what happened was two of the districts in Iowa with some of the highest transportation costs became one. So we joined both Northwind and Decorah pre-merger were districts that were probably in, I would say the top 10 to 15% of per pupil cost for transportation. And so then when we merged, our transportation costs at that time, when you compared us to other school districts, we were like in the top 10 of all 327 districts on how much we spent per pupil on transportation each year. What that meant for us was that we benefited greatly from the transportation equity work that the legislature has done over the last few years, where we receive additional funding to help bring us to that state average. So instead of us eating up general fund money that could be spent closer to students on textbooks, on materials, keeping the lights on, that stuff, we receive now some transportation equity money that we didn't receive 5 years ago that puts some of that back into our general fund. And so that is something that I'm very grateful to the legislature, to Governor Reynolds, that they've taken action around transportation equity. That's been a good thing for us.
I know this might be kind of an awkward question for you to ask, but the board is starting to do some work regarding replacing you this week.
Yeah. We have a special meeting tonight with representatives from Grunmeyer Leader Search. Grunmeyer Leader Search is the organization that helped facilitate the search process several years ago when I came to the district, and so the board felt good about the process in that search, and so is working with Grunmeyer Leader Search again through the process. And so we've set a date of February 7th for on-site interviews with finalists. And so, that's something that in many ways I stay out of it. But if a request for some help or anything with logistics or anything like that is needed, I'm happy to help out. I think when I was in town for my interview, Mr. Haluska on that interview day, he gave each candidate a tour of the district. And just it was an opportunity to see some of the buildings, to talk a little bit with the outgoing superintendent. And so I think that's our plan in this next round. And so on interview day, I would just be available to give our candidates a tour of a couple of buildings, answer any questions they may have for me. And then, we'll have a representative group of students and staff and community members that will engage in interviews. And having experienced that, I can say it is a very thorough interview process.
Are you going to wear a chauffeur's hat that day?
I will. If it's like the day when I was here, the day of interviews, I think we got about 10 inches of snow and school was canceled that day, but we still had the interview. So it'll be a chauffeur's hat and my boots. Oh,
good planning there, Mark. Anything else you want to pass on to district residents, as long as you got the forum this morning?
I guess I would just say just how grateful we were and are to a number of community partners as our high school community faced the tragedy that we faced before winter break. From our local healthcare providers, Luther College, our ministerial group, youth ministers and local ministers, Keystone AEA, they have a crisis response team. And then just, other, just people in our community reaching out to our families, to our students, to our staff. It was incredibly meaningful to have those supports. And I know from Mrs. Shepard and Mr. Riley at the high school, they were incredibly grateful for that support as well. And just a heartfelt thank you to those partners and to our community, and just our continued thoughts and prayers for our students, their families, our staff, everyone impacted. That's we take great pride in our school district, and I think it's these types of moments where that community comes together and rallies together that just remind you why our schools are such a big part of our community. So thank you to everybody.
Mark, we appreciate your time as always. Look forward to having another conversation with you next month. And I want some photos of you in the chauffeur's hat, by the way.
Will do.
Mark Lane, Decorah School Superintendent. A sincere debt of gratitude to our four guests on the program this morning. State Representatives Mike Bergan of Dorchester and Ann Osmundson of Volga. Kathy Schwartzhoff from Helping Services for Youth and Family, and Decorah School Superintendent Mark Lane. Don't forget, each and every week we put these shows on YouTube, and you can actually see the people that we get to talk to on a week in and week out basis. Go to the Facebook page of any of the LA communication stations, Hawk Rock, KVIK, 94.9 and 99.1 The River, or KNEI. We post these usually Wednesday afternoon or early Thursday morning. So we understand you can't always be by a radio at 9 a.m. on Thursday morning, but it's interesting content and interesting people we get to talk to. And you can head to YouTube and listen to these conversations and watch these conversations by heading to our website. Also, if you just go to YouTube, search 1/13 Our Town program, it should be available to you right then and there. So don't forget to watch this program on YouTube if you can't make it to the radio by 9 a.m. on a Thursday morning. Our thanks to our guest, our thanks to our sponsor, Decorah Bank and Trust, and most importantly, we thank you for tuning in, for logging on, or for watching Our Town on 94.9 and 99.1 at The River.